Today we are going to be talking about a really important subject in the antique doll community, and that is the subject of fakes, fantasies, forgeries, dolls that were made to, and they are still made today, dolls that were made to defraud people, to confuse people, and to be sold as a rare antique. And they're not an antique, they're a new doll. Newly made doll. And so there is a very big distinction between a fake, a fantasy, and a fraud. And the word fraud is a very heavy loaded word, but a couple of the dolls we're going to show you are frauds because they were made to confuse, made to defraud, and they were actually sold as such. So unknowing people purchased them as antiques, thought they were antiques, and then lost a lot of money. Now, this discussion is one that a lot of people are afraid to do because they are afraid to, number one, hurt people's feelings. That, I think, is the biggest thing I run into, is that they're afraid to hurt people's feelings. And it's just something that people, they just don't want to touch it, because sometimes you can be wrong too. There are different kinds of things that happen with antique dolls, and there are many different factory irregularities that happen with dolls, but we're going to just give you we're going to show you some examples and give you some basics of the things that I see a lot. And I have a special guest. So we have a special guest here today, and let's see if I can actually tag her in the video. And we are here with, you're not on it yet, Linda. We're here with, let's see. We are here with Linda Wall, and she is a modern, I would call you a modern doll artist specializing in reproductions of antique dolls. So, and she started doing this because back in the day when she wanted to collect very expensive antique dolls, she couldn't afford it. That's what you said. Those are your words, right? You couldn't afford it, so you wanted to make your own. And she can afford it now. She buys really wonderful dolls. But back in the day, she wanted to make her own. And she started making the antique dolls. Now, she is held and has always stuck to a code of ethics where she signs her dolls and she dates her dolls. So if you looked on the back of the doll, there's no question that it is not an antique doll. And her dolls are fabulous. And Linda teaches classes, and Uniquely Yours Porcelain Dolls, I highly recommend it. I will be at the convention later in October. So there's a lot. I'm standing here with somebody that is an expert in creating real reproductions of antique dolls that are actually made and represented the way they're supposed to be. We're going to look at a couple examples of a lot of the little fakes that we see coming out of Germany that are all over the internet. They're usually priced between like $50 and $100, and a lot of them are represented as real antique German dolls. They're little albisks. Do you guys remember when all of those albisks that were represented on the little cards came out? You used to go to Germany and you could like, people would have them on tables all over the table, and you could buy them really cheap, and I'm saying for a few dollars, and then people turned around and sold them on the internet for like hundreds. So we're going to look at a couple of those. And again, this is not meant to scare you. This is not meant to stop you. This has happened to, I mean, some of the fakes that I'm going to be showing you, we purchased off of the internet thinking they were real, and they were represented by the people who sold them thinking they were real. So it does happen. If it doesn't mean you're bad, it's just something to really look out for. Now I'm going to turn the camera around. We're going to talk to Linda Wall. Linda, thank you so much for being here today, having this discussion with us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So we're here, and we had Doll Club at your house last night, and we talked about fakes and fantasies, and you opened the discussion with a couple of just off the board, without even, you don't even need an example to use these tips. And what were those tips for looking for and spotting fake dolls?
Well, when you make a reproduction of an antique, or we make a mold from an antique doll, when we pour it in porcelain, it will always shrink 13% or 13.5, depending on the type of porcelain you use. Different porcelain companies shrink differently, so that you need to be aware of how the shrinkage is when you're putting it on the comp body. But that would be number one. Know the size of the original doll. If you think, oh, it's a cute little one, well, find out if it was made that size. Because it very well could be. That would be number one. I would be very aware of that. Another thing is sometimes know the painting, know the colors of the doll, know the bisque. Our bisque today is very fine. And I've also been thinking, when they did their firing, their bisque has a certain glow, and it's got a different, just a different look.
Yeah.
And it could be because of their kilns. They were little beehives. They weren't these fancy electric kilns that we have that are electric, that do not have any fumes. Really, our fumes, we have exhaust vents. So that could be the difference in our porcelain. I'm not sure. It's just a thought. But there's definitely a look about the porcelain you can tell if you've been watching, if you really look at it. Another thing is, if you can look inside, a lot of times that will be a good clue of the head. Of course, you always look inside of every head you purchase.
Of course, right. If you can.
If you can.
Yeah.
Always examine your dolls really well. And a true reproduction artist is always told, and we have a code of ethics, that we sign all of our work. We were never started to defraud anybody.
Right.
We just wanted to make dolls because, and I can say it's taught me a lot. I've learned fashions, and I've studied, and but it's mainly color. Know your colors between your German and French. They get them confused.
Yep. They do.
They get it. If you've got something wrong with that color, it's more than likely just start looking.
Yes.
Question it.
Start looking and question it. And for those of you that are just tuning in, we had a lot of you hop on. We're going to be looking at some real life examples of dolls that were made to fake and defraud. They're still beautiful dolls, and we're going to look at some artist examples too. But again, don't be afraid to have these discussions, okay? Jonathan Green, he has an entire collection of dolls that were made in the likeness of Katie Cruza. So it's not like the dolls that were made at the same time, or that were made, some people collect the dolls that were made to be fake. So there's a whole world to explore in that. So take whatever tip that you find from our discussion today to just use in your doll collecting journey, and keep having fun with it. So just know that nothing is, just learn as much as you can. So we're going to look at some pictures right here. Linda, why don't you pull up your laptop? So what we showed up, oh, well, we were talking so much that it went away. That's okay.
I'm going to have to put my...
So here's a couple of the dolls we're going to be talking about. Again, Jonathan Green has a wonderful, wonderful collection of dolls that were made to defraud of the Kathy Cruz. So we're going to look closely at these. Now, these came out of Germany, in the 1970s. They look totally old, but look at the wire looping. So you can kind of see it right there on the top of his head. When you see one of these dolls listed on the internet as an antique and they have this wire looping, no antique dolls were strung that way. Okay, let's look at the other pictures. Yeah, go ahead and move it over. So let's go next door. Okay. So here's some more examples. So these are little googlies that you just see all over the internet, these little albisques, and sometimes they sell for $100 to $200. And the biggest sign right there is the fake looping at the top of the head, big one. And then Linda, what are some of the other characteristics of the dolls that stick out to you?
To me, it's the painting.
Yeah.
It's in the hair. Look at the hair.
Yeah. The hair is always a big one for me. The hair is really hard for them to do. We're going to look at the Carl over here, that the hair is just terrible. So, not terrible, but it's very interesting. So these I see on the internet all of the time. And you can tell, like, the whole thing looks mismatched on these. But if you look at the wire, these ones you see on the internet a lot, these little jester type clowns. But look at the painting. And then we're going to scroll over to this picture right here. Look at the wire looping. So that's a biggie. That's a biggie. Some people will, unscrupulous people on eBay, I'm just going to say it, will take these dolls that have the wire looping on the top of the head, and sometimes they'll add little tassels and different things to cover up the wire looping because they know. And now that you guys know, you can say, hey, can you show me what's under that little tassel on the top of the hat? And if it's wire looping, then it's a fake doll. Here's a couple of these. What do you have to say about these, Linda? These are famous.
They're very easily reproduced too.
Right.
And there's molds out there that are a little larger and than these.
So these are dolls that when they came out, a lot of people unfortunately bought them. They still buy them today. But when you see these dolls, they're very easily reproduced. Here they are sitting on the back of this box. You see them a lot. These are the kind of fakes that we see a lot. And again, a lot of it's going by your gut, but they pretty much look like this.
Okay. One thing I learned when I was starting out collecting, do your homework first.
Uh-huh.
Just don't go out and buy a doll as a beginner collector. Find out what kind of dolls you really love and study them.
Mm-hmm.
And books, and read. And then find reputable dealers that will help you and guide you, because once you get a real antique in your hand and you can feel the difference in the weight and the heaviness of it will tell you a lot.
Right.
On the doll.
The weight and the heaviness. And just, yeah, one of the ways that people ask me, well, how can you tell? It's really hard to say, well, I've been staring at how they look for my entire life. So if you can go to a museum or even just look in the pages of a book and just really get that intrinsic feel for how an antique doll feels, you can pretty much spot a fake across the room once you get there, once you have a little bit of practice. So now here are some fakes that we're going to look at. So let's start with, we might as well just start with Carl. He's kind of our famous fake right here. Carl was originally purchased for $25,000, and he went to court, and he had all kinds of things happen with him. He's quite a famous doll. He was given to us for the purpose of these kind of discussions. So, Linda, what can you tell us about Carl?
Well, first of all, it's his hair. Mm-hmm. And then his eyes.
Right.
The eyes, usually that line around the outside goes completely around the whole very, very, very fine line. And then the eyelid line is usually a little darker and more distinct.
So you guys are getting a very, very, very close-up look of, a doll that was passed off to somebody for tens of thousands of dollars. He, to me, looks like a fake across the room. So to me, he's not even like one of the better fakes that I've seen. No. But you can tell he's just a lot lighter. He doesn't glow like an antique bisque. And look at the transition of the hair to the back of the head. It just doesn't look right. It just doesn't feel right. No. And now we're going to look at the marking. And the marking, look at that. See how in the factory it was kind of impressed in there? This was just kind of chiseled in. This was just chiseled in with a little tool. Nothing about that looks right.
No.
Again, this was sold before a lot of us even talked about this sort of thing too, though.
And for me, I would probably question where the placement is on this.
It's too low.
It's usually right up in here that you will find a marking. I am not familiar, and I haven't studied this doll that much, but I would question.
Yep, it's too low. One time we had somebody email us some pictures of some wonderful Kamer and Reinhardt characters, and we almost went on a plane to go buy them. And Sally said, ask them to do the centimeter measurement of the head. And as soon as we got those measurements back, we knew they were fake.
Okay.
Because they were about 3 centimeters too small.
Okay.
And she saved us so much time and effort and money. It was about $100,000 worth of dolls.
That's great.
I mean, it was a big lesson. So this one, he is on a wonderful antique body. He's on antique clothing. He's got all the parts and pieces, but no go, sir. Okay, which one should we talk about next?
I guess the mechanical.
Yeah, let's talk about the mechanical. We see these a lot.
Mechanicals, there's a lot of molds out there that you can put the heads. The heads have been shrunk to put on the mechanical foundations. You can buy this simple foundation. There was one years ago that Sealy had put out. It was one of the first ones, and this is I have it. It might be put on a box.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were, this box, that would help it. But definitely, if you look at this, look at the eyelashes, look at the painting. It screams reproduction.
Yeah, this one screams reproduction, and this one's pretty obvious, but there are some really good ones out there. Usually when we see these automatons, this one is sitting in the center of the box. Generally, the box will be bigger, and then the doll is like sitting off to the side. It's usually stuck on the side. And then, of course, if you could ever get a picture or a video of the mechanism in the inside, you'll know that all of those pieces on the inside are new. One of the things that's hardest for people to replicate, is the eyebrows. Now, her eyebrows are wrong because they're molded. They're kind of coming off of her face. The eyebrows and the lips are two of the hardest things I find for people to replicate in French fashions. You too?
I agree.
You agree?
And each fashion has a different lip shape and different brow structure.
Mm-hmm.
And then remember, you've got coloring. And
coloring is so important.
The coloring, the painting is...
So let's look at another one. So this is a classic French fashion, fake French fashion. First of all, her eyebrows are just too thin. They're too arched. They're just not right. They would have been a lot thicker. And you can just tell by looking at it, they just don't look right.
Mm-hmm. And also look at the eye cut.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, some of the antiques eye cuts aren't perfect.
Right.
You got to remember that.
Some of them are really bad.
So, but definitely look at the lip color and look at her coloring. Now, usually the fashions are real pale. And if we took her apart, I would guess that she doesn't even have a tint or a wash on her, which is, a tint means a slight coloration. Be interesting. Usually you can tell a tint is put on white slip or bisque. And this I can't tell. Mm-hmm. I think this is all one colored slip on top of it. If you look real close, it hasn't got a wash on it.
Yeah. I think this would be a fun program to actually do at a regional or UFDC, because if I brought all of these dolls, I would have no problem letting people handle them and really get a feel. Once you feel her face. And then you feel the face of an antique French bisque doll, and close your eyes. If you close your eyes and do it, it is like night and day.
And the feel. It's the feel. I mean, it's something about the weight. Mm-hmm. And if you can ever, get that in your head, you'll know immediately.
Exactly.
And the wig is nice, but a lot of unfortunately, our fashions have had replaced wigs too. So you can't falter for that.
No, many antique dolls, of course, almost all of them have had replaced wigs, replaced clothing, stuff like that. But a lot of these unscrupulous dolls they'll have everything else right. They're going to have the right antique body.
You can see.
So she's got a replaced body. Mm-hmm. Now, but she is, I think, a good example of what a lot of these fake French fashions look like that we do see on the internet a lot of the time. Okay, so here, let's look at another one. So this one, just for reference. Okay, so this one right here, I'm going to show you guys. This one is signed. Do you see that 1995? That means she was made in 1995. So she is correctly made. There is nothing unscrupulous with this doll right here because she is properly marked. She's supposed to be a Brujon, and she's sure trying real hard. But that's what they should be signed with. We have a couple other great examples. This Kaiser baby. Tell us about him, Linda.
The Kaiser baby is really, when you first look at him, he's really cute.
He is so cute. He's actually well made.
And you look at him, but I would question right here on the way they put his hairlines, and that was just done with brush strokes. And usually they're more, how do I say it? It's not quite this bleeding kind of thing that's going on. It's more of a matte underneath, and then there's a few brush strokes.
Right.
But it was clearly signed.
Again, so this is a good example. This doll was made by Polly. So we can see, and then right over there on the other side is Polly Mann. So Polly Mann made this doll, so there's not going to be any question that this is not an antique doll. But we do see these coming through without that, and they could easily be passed off as a fake doll. But again, look at the marking. Do you see how it was just kind of etched in with a piece of like a tool, like just a little etching tool? It's not impressed into the bisque.
Well, sometimes this is the way it looks, Rachel, when it comes out of the mold.
Okay,
Because
so it is light.
It is light because what you have done is you've made a mold from the original, which isn't really that dark.
Right.
And so each time it gets fainter. And
That is
that's
such a good thing to bring up, Linda,
Okay.
because I have had many antique dolls where the marking was so faint, you could barely see it.
So if you make a mold from that, then it's going to get even lighter each time because you make a wax. And then from the wax mold, you make the plaster mold, then you make the rubber mold. So this is a very nice, if all you wanted was a doll to dress
And enjoy.
fine, this is great.
Your house was full of dolls that you have made antique reproductions that were just lovely. And when they're represented the way that they're supposed to, there is no reason why you can't enjoy them. And many of the people that are watching this right now do antique reproductions. It's not wrong. This is to save you from buying one that you think is an antique and they're trying to fool you.
Yes, and the other thing is when you're doing a reproduction, all reproduction artists should study the antique. If you don't study the antique, you can't get the soul of the antique, and it doesn't come through in your painting. So for an antique reproduction artist, it is the joy it brings from creating.
And the love you had for the original antique.
So
Right.
if you can ever, once you get the original antique, you charge a lot.
Right.
Really love it.
Well, Ruby Lane is actually one of the sponsors of your DAG convention, the Doll Artisan Guild convention, coming up in October. And while Ruby Lane doesn't allow for antique reproductions, why would we sponsor such an event?
Well, mainly because most of us have become collectors.
Exactly. You guys are the ones loving and buying the antique dolls.
We are, and we're the ones out there sewing for them.
Right.
And creating and teaching workshops because we love the antiques, and our love for creating has caused us to start collecting.
Love it.
But I am a fanatic on, if you see my library, of research, because until you research, then you'll know when you see that doll if it's original or something's wrong. Because I have been known to be in the sales room and look at a doll and pull. I pull another professional over and say, am I seeing the same thing? And they will either verify it or tell me, educate me. And that's what I love about it. It's constant learning.
Yes, learning.
And no mistake is really a mistake if you learn from it.
I agree. Every mistake, every mishap, every oopsie daisy is an opportunity to learn. It's such an opportunity. So here, I'm going to tell you about what happened to me. This one right here. So this is a little whistling Jim, and we bought him off of the internet from an online auction, a reputable online auction, I'm going to say. And I had him at 2 or 3 shows, and every single time I pulled him out of my case, I just thought, something about this doll feels off. He just doesn't feel right. His coloring isn't right. He's not glowing the way he's supposed to, and the lips, they look strange too. But I brought him to 3 shows, feeling this way, and I mean, he is fantastic. But I had that gut feeling that we just we know. And so I pulled him off of the floor when we were at the NADA show, and I showed him to a couple other dealer friends, and they had that same gut feeling. And then when I really looked at the lips, okay, now we're going to show it next to an antique one. I mean, the deal was done. I pulled him off of the floor, and he is now a teaching piece. So we're going to look at him next to a real one. Now, when you have the real one next to it, it's like, oh, that's night and day. But when they're contained and they're shown by themselves, it can be really hard. What do you notice here?
What I notice is the lip shape.
Right.
Big time.
Big time.
This is definitely a French lip. Big time French. And look at how low this lip is coming down and how broad this mouth is. And it doesn't have this high peak. Okay?
Yep.
It's very wide. But look at the eyes. That's the tay-tail right there.
Right there.
And look at the size.
Right.
There. Okay. It's always real light, which is the iris. And the recessed part is the black, which represents the pupil. Notice the highlight. The highlights are in the right spot, but usually the highlights, even when in the molding, are right where the black or the pupil and the iris meet. See that? And see the dots here or not?
Right, exactly. Exactly. And for those of you that might be just tuning in, we are looking at a very, very good fake. This doll was fake, made to defraud. It was sold as an antique. I purchased it off the internet, and it is not. It is fake, and we're looking at the difference. This is a real one now. Next to this one glows. This one has the look of an antique, but this is a really good one.
This has got more, probably another wash on it. This has just got a light tint. You notice the difference in coloring. Look at the difference of where they painted. They didn't go clear down to the bottom of the hairline here. This one's up. You can see the molding right there. This, if you look at the top of the hair, the difference in color.
Such a big difference. For those of you that are, again, just tuning in, we're here with Linda Wall, who is a very, very, very accomplished antique reproduction artist. And we are chatting reproductions, and so that you can spot them when they are represented as an antique, and to help to protect yourself. So here, these are two different sizes, but the marking on this one, I'm just going to say it is really, on the fake, is really good. Really, really good. They kind of nailed that, actually.
Yeah.
The 87 is a little bit too big. But however they figured out how to do the marking on this, pretty darn good.
Yeah, the marking, you know, it's in the mold. It comes out in the wax when you make the mold of the antique. So it would be, but it's just how good the original was. So how, and then it depends on your mold maker.
Yeah,
too.
it depends on the mold maker. And just for reference, so you guys can see this, the Whistling Jim was also on an antique body. So there's his body. So he was passed off, and he's exchanged many hands. And I'm glad I got a hold of him so I could teach. We lost several $100s in this, but it's an opportunity. So there we go. Now this is a really good one.
He is very cute. But here again, you notice his eyes.
Of this. I don't know if it's ours or not.
10 boxes of what?
It's like cups and saucers from Home Depot in Valencia, California.
And is it addressed to us?
Yes,
Oh. Is the boo still here?
yes. I need to know if he should take them with him or leave them.
Okay. Linda, can you just hold this? And so Linda's going to take over the camera work. We are live here in a doll shop in Duty Call. So I'm going to be back. Linda's going to talk about this doll for a couple minutes. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Good job, Linda.
Thank you. I've never done this before. So basically this little doll, if you notice his eyes, let's pull the color. Let's see if I can get it over. Oh, there. Maybe I need to have Paul. See the difference in color in the eyes? Also, what I'm seeing. Okay, here, Paul, you control this camera, please. I'm talking about the eyebrows. But I want you to notice more than anything, it's the bisque, the coloring of the dolls. And these little German dolls are very highly colored, what we consider highly colored. So, and it's also sometimes what we call ruddy. It's a different texture. So, and this one is so terribly smooth. Here again, this doll was not meant to defraud. It was dated that someone made it, but they didn't have enough pride to even put their name on it. So what we say is, if you're making these dolls, what we try to do is, I tell people, if you're making them for hand-me-downs for your grandchildren or something, sign them, because that's what makes them important to your family. And if that's what the purpose is, and what most of my students do, hand them down to their family members, or time capsule them, why you made them, and they put little notes in them. That's the fun thing. So
That is such a wonderful thing to bring up, and a good sentiment.
while we're on the subject,
Yeah, just don't hold that down. Just let it move. Oh,
if, for example, this was a reproduction doll, we at the Guild sign our dolls here or on the back of the shoulder plate down here. So don't always just look up in here on a bisque or Parian or China. Always look in there. Sometimes look in here. Mm-hmm. People will etch things in here, and that will tell you, be careful.
right. I'm back, and thank you all for this discussion. And Linda, I'm here with Linda Wall. She is a wonderful antique doll reproduction artist, and she is giving us some wonderful telltale signs and tips of how to identify the difference between a fake and a real doll. And again, this discussion isn't made to scare you. It's not made to get you to stop buying antique dolls. If anything, this will help you buy more, because you're going to feel more empowered in your knowledge and what you're doing, and help with everything that you're doing. So Linda, do we have any other tips that we haven't discussed real quick? I think did you talk about the googly?
No, I haven't. The only thing I suggest is if we could get a real antique fashion, you could tell. I mean, it would scream.
Oh, for this one, absolutely. Yeah. Do we have any here? I don't know if we do. We're out of French fashions. We must have some heads over there, actually. I'm sure we do. But if you guys are tuning in, feel free to share this video. It's going to stay on my page forever. And we just had a very in-depth discussion on, we focused mainly on bisques. Now, we can talk about, there are so many different facets of this subject that we could talk about. Again, my friend Jonathan Green has an entire collection of dolls. Oh, here we go. Okay.
This one is broken.
This one is broken, everybody, but it is an antique, so we're just going to look.
Look at the difference. Right there.
Okay, on the right is an antique, on the left is a fake. The eyebrows, the lips, the cheeks,
the coloring.
Look
at the bisque.
Right. Yeah. See, and when you have them next to each other, it's like,
and
it's
look
like
at the
night
nose
and day.
dots.
Oh, look at the nose dots, everybody. Look at that. Oh my goodness.
Okay. The other thing is, look at the fineness of these strokes. And these are appropriately placed, where this one has way too many on the bottom, and they're blunt on the top.
So if somebody would like to get interested into how to make wonderful, fine, antique reproduction dolls the right way and by the right teacher, Linda, how can they do that?
I would contact or look on the Guild.
The Doll Artisan Guild
website. Find the closest studio and teacher that is a doll artisan teacher, instructor, educator. And get under one of them and
and learn
and start out with the beginning, because don't start out because I want to do fashions, because all of the dolls, all my students, I encourage them highly to take not only modern dolls, making them, painted eyes, but also antiques. Because antiques teach you control, modern teaches you to be more free.
Yes.
And then, of course, you have porcelain art, which is all of the figurines and stuff. So you can just have fun, but take from the very best.
Take from the very best. Linda is one of the very best, and she lives here in Colorado. You can fly in and you can stay at her amazing house that is so beautiful. It's just like a wonderful estate that she has in Strasbourg, and you can stay for like 2 or 3 days, or how long? 4 or 5 days.
Usually the classes are 3 to 4 days.
Usually the classes are 3 to 4 days, and one of the stops that includes one of the field trips is actually coming to our shop. So if you fly in to take one of her doll making classes, you're also going to come to see me one night and to look at all the dolls. So it's kind of a win-win.
It is, because we get to educate and we get special tours. We open up the cases and you can really see them. And the girls that have never seen an antique doll get to see one, and usually they end up finding out they can buy one.
They can always buy one, and if you don't buy one, totally okay. We it's after hours, so we close the shop and we have refreshments and drinks and food for you guys. The ladies are usually too busy shopping. They don't eat the food, so we eat it. We always eat it the next day. But sign up for one of her classes. It's what's your website?
Uniquely Yours Porcelain Dolls.
Uniquely Yours Porcelain Dolls, and you offer several classes a year with wonderful guest teachers.
I do. Usually I only have Cheryl Williams, and she's always in August.
Who's the best?
Yeah. And unfortunately, it's on a wait list, but always put your name on a wait list, because there's sometimes we have cancellations.
Right.
And then I teach the beginning level ones, which is a series of 3 classes, which teaches you pouring. And if you take from me on antique reproductions, you will find out you have to study the picture, the doll, and understand what you're painting. So,
and these are open to everybody. So if you have a love of antique dolls, if you have a love of collecting, and you'd like to make one your own as your own keepsake and something to hand down in your family, it's wonderful to hand down antique dolls. But how awesome would it be to hand down a doll that Grandma Rachel made, Grandma Linda made? You know, that's really cool.
And it's funny, my kids have gone through, even my stepchildren have gone through, and I've offered them some of my antiques, and they picked every one of the ones that I've bought, or I've made.
That you've made, yeah.
Said, take them, because I need more room.
You need more room. Okay, well, and if they don't want your antique ones, then you'd make sure to put a note on them to send them to Turn of the Century, because
I've got a dolly
we'll take good care of them. We'll take good care of them. So
okay.
We hope you guys enjoyed this program. Please feel free to share it. I will be linking to Linda's website to do a seminar with her if you'd like, and we hope you guys enjoyed this discussion. Bye.